Sometimes, one story is enough to change a heart forever. Welcome to Heart Change Stories.
She cleaned her father's barn after his death. The day her father's will was read, Maya's world collapsed. Her white step-siblings got the mansions, cars, and fortune. She got a rotting barn and laughter in her face. But when she stepped into that dusty silence, something felt off. The floor creaked, the air shifted, and under the smell of hay and rust, a secret waited, one her father left only for her. Before we go any further, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us, and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Now let's begin. The funeral smelled of lilies and rain-damp earth. Maya sat in the second row, hands clasped so tight her knuckles ached. Her father's coffin rested at the front, mahogany polished to a mirror, surrounded by people who barely knew him. The pastor's voice faded behind the hum of whispers. He left the company to the boys, right? Someone chuckled softly, thinking she couldn't hear. After the burial, the family gathered in the farmhouse's drawing room. The lawyer cleared his throat, papers trembling slightly in his hands. According to the last testament of Richard Thompson, everyone leaned forward. The first line read out like a drumroll of privilege. The mansion, the vineyards, the fleet of cars, all to the sons from his first marriage. Their mother, pale and polished, flashed a smile sharp enough to cut glass. Then came the pause. And to Maya Thompson. The lawyer hesitated, eyes flicking toward her. The old farmhouse and adjacent barn. Silence. Then laughter cracked open the room. One brother muttered, "Guess she gets the hay." Another added, "Maybe she'll find a horse to match." Maya's cheeks burned, but she said nothing. Her stepmother leaned back, folding manicured hands. "It's symbolic," she purred. "He always said you were earthy." The lawyer tried to continue, but the words blurred. Maya stared at the papers in front of her, only 2 lines long, signed by the same father who once taught her to plant seeds and count the stars from that very barn roof. Outside, thunder rolled across the valley. She rose quietly, chair legs scraping against the marble floor. "I'll take what's mine," she said, voice steady but eyes wet. No one stopped her. As she stepped into the cold evening, the scent of wet soil hit her raw, grounding. Behind her, laughter returned, muffled through the walls like echoes of a life she no longer belonged to. By the time she reached her car, the first drops of rain streaked the windshield. She glanced at the folded deed on the passenger seat, creased, smudged, but undeniably hers. For the first time that day, she smiled, barely. "All right, Dad," she whispered. "Let's see what you left me." The engine rumbled to life, headlights slicing through the downpour as she drove toward the valley, toward the barn everyone else had forgotten. By the time Maya reached the edge of the property, the rain had slowed to a whisper. The old farmhouse rose from the mist like a memory refusing to die. Its roof sagged, shutters hung loose, and ivy crawled up its sides like it was trying to hold the place together. She parked near the barn, headlights cutting across the muddy field. When she stepped out, the smell hit her first: wet hay, rust, and the faint sweetness of oil-soaked wood. The same scent she remembered from childhood afternoons when her father would whistle while fixing tractors and let her feed the horses. Now, silence pressed down like a heavy coat. She pushed open the barn door. The hinges groaned. A wave of dust drifted up, swirling through thin beams of gray morning light. Cobwebs clung to rafters like old lace. She stood there for a moment, arms crossed, just breathing it, in loss, memory, and dirt all mixed together. "Looks like nobody's cared for you in years," she murmured, her voice echoing softly. The broom she found near the wall was cracked, but it still worked. Each sweep stirred up ghosts. Feed sacks, labeled with faded initials, rusted buckets, a broken lantern. She worked for hours, sleeves rolled up, hair tied back with an old ribbon she found in the glove compartment. Outside, the sky cleared, revealing streaks of sunlight that made the barn glow like an old photograph. Sweat gathered at her temple. Her palms blistered, but she kept going. At one point she laughed quietly. "Dad, you really left me a project, didn't you?" By noon she found herself staring at a warped beam, carved with initials R.T+M. T. The small M was hers, etched when she was 9. Beneath it, The wood had splintered slightly, as though something had been pried loose. She touched it, feeling a soft give, but didn't push further. The sound of tires on gravel startled her. She peeked through a gap in the boards. A white SUV had pulled up. Her stepmother stepped out, perfect as ever in pressed slacks and sunglasses, followed by one of the brothers. They didn't approach the barn. They just stood there, surveying the land like vultures circling. "She can have this dump," the brother said. "Mom, you really think Dad meant to leave her anything worth something?" The woman's voice carried sharp through the air. "He was sentimental. Always thought pity was a virtue." Maya crouched behind a stack of hay bales, breath shallow. Their voices faded as they drove away, leaving only the sound of the wind knocking against the barn walls. When she stood again, something inside her shifted. The humiliation that had followed her from the will reading began to harden into quiet resolve. She wiped sweat from her brow and grabbed a rusted toolbox from under the bench. That's when she noticed one of the floorboards near the back corner slightly raised, uneven. She pressed her boot against it. It moved. A hollow echo answered beneath. She knelt, heart thudding, and brushed away the dirt. The wood lifted easily, revealing a small compartment. Inside lay a single brass key wrapped in oilcloth, and a folded note yellowed with time. She unfolded it carefully. Her father's handwriting was unmistakable, strong and slanted. "Where the earth meets its mirror, truth waits for its keeper." The words didn't make sense, but the ink was fresh enough to look intentional. She sat back, holding the key up to the light, her reflection flashing faintly in the metal. For the first time since the funeral, her grief felt different, not hollow, but alive, carrying a pulse of curiosity that refused to die. She slipped the key into her pocket, stood up, and looked around the barn again, really looked this time. Something in the air felt heavier, charged. "Okay, Dad," she whispered. "What are you trying to tell me?" The wind blew through the open doorway, scattering bits of hay across the clean floor, almost like an answer. That night, the valley lay under a sheet of silver mist. The farmhouse groaned with every gust of wind, but Maya couldn't sleep. The note burned in her mind, like a whisper she couldn't silence. "Where the earth meets its mirror." She sat by the window, watching moonlight spill across the barn roof. By 2 a.m., she'd had enough. She grabbed a flashlight and her father's old jacket hanging by the door. The ground was damp beneath her boots as she crossed the field, crickets chirping low and steady. Inside, the barn was colder than before. Her breath fogged faintly in the air. She aimed her flashlight across the floor over the hay bales, the tool bench, the spot where she found the key. She noticed something she'd missed earlier. A hairline crack in the concrete, beneath a set of stacked crates, just wide enough to look suspicious. She shoved the crates aside, heart pounding harder than she expected. The sound of wood scraping echoed in the silence. Kneeling, she ran her fingers along the edge. The concrete was slightly raised. When she pressed her palm down, it moved. The section lifted like a trapdoor, releasing a stale breath of air that smelled of soil and iron. Beneath it, narrow steps disappeared into darkness. Her flashlight trembled slightly in her hand. "Dad," she muttered under her breath, half afraid of the answer. She descended slowly. The walls were dirt, packed tight but lined with old boards. Cobwebs clung to her hair. Each step creaked softly under her boots until the tunnel opened into a small underground chamber, barely big enough for 2 people to stand. Her light landed on shelves filled with boxes, metal, sealed, and labeled in her father's handwriting. The first one read, "Harvest Logs 2009. Another said, "Company Records." But one, near the corner, bore only a single word, "Maya." Her throat tightened. She brushed the dust off the lid and unlatched it. Inside were folders tied neatly with twine, old photographs, and documents stamped with the name Thompson Holdings Limited. The first page listed company ownership. Under principal shareholder, one name was printed, Maya Thompson. She sank onto a crate, the papers trembling in her hands. Her father hadn't forgotten her. He'd hidden everything for her. He must have known someone would try to take it away. The next folder revealed letters, drafts of a trust, notes of meetings, and a recording device. She pressed play. Static crackled. Then his voice filled the space, soft and familiar. "If you're hearing this, It means I couldn't tell you in time. The company's yours, Maya. I built it under your name years ago. Your stepmother's been trying to move assets for months. This was the only way to keep it safe. Trust the barn. It's always protected what mattered. She covered her mouth, tears welling before she realized she was crying. The voice continued, growing faint. You were always the one with heart. I knew you'd find this when it mattered most. When the tape clicked off, the silence was deafening. She sat there, letting the weight of every word sink in. Up above, the first light of dawn began to seep through the cracks in the floorboards, tracing faint lines across the dirt ceiling. She gathered the documents carefully into a box, then took one last look around. There were maps, safes, sealed envelopes, evidence of years of planning. As she climbed back up the stairs, a strange calm settled over her. Every doubt, every insult at that will reading, every laugh suddenly had context. Her father hadn't disinherited her. He'd entrusted her. When she emerged into the barn again, sunlight was spilling through the open door. The dust looked almost golden in the light. She wiped her face with her sleeve and whispered, "You outsmarted them all, didn't you?" For the first time since he died, she felt him near not as a memory, but as a quiet certainty. She locked the trapdoor behind her, pocketed the key, and looked toward the farmhouse on the hill where her stepmother slept soundly, unaware. A storm was coming, but this time, it was hers to command. By sunrise, the air smelled of rain and rust. Maya stood in front of the farmhouse mirror. The documents spread out across the table beside her company shares, transfer letters, notarized seals, everything bearing her father's signature. The realization still felt unreal. She poured herself coffee with shaking hands, watching the black swirls settle. Her phone buzzed. A message from her stepmother. "Don't embarrass yourself with your little barn. We're meeting with the estate lawyers today." Maya smiled faintly, slipping the papers into a worn leather folder. "You'll be meeting me," she murmured. By 10 a.m., the conference room downtown was filled with tension thick enough to taste. Her stepmother sat at the center of the polished oak table, surrounded by her two sons and a pair of attorneys. The men greeted Maya with polite smirks, the kind that said, "You don't belong here." The lead lawyer cleared his throat. "Miss Thompson, we understand you're contesting the will?" "Not the will," she said, placing her folder on the table. "The ownership." He frowned. "I'm sorry?" She opened the folder and began laying out the documents one by one, each stamped, sealed, and dated. The lawyer leaned in, his eyes narrowed. The room fell silent as they realized what they were seeing. Incorporation certificates naming Maya Thompson as the primary shareholder of Thompson Holdings, the same company that technically owned all family estates, cars, and assets. Her stepmother's face drained of color. "This is absurd," she snapped. "Those are forged." Maya slid forward another page. "They're not. These are the original notary stamps from Dad's legal team. You can check the signatures." The younger brother scoffed. "This doesn't mean anything. The court already." "It means," Maya interrupted softly, "that the will you laughed about was never the whole picture. The company owns everything, and my father made sure of it. You inherited titles, not control." For a moment, no one spoke. The stepmother's lawyer muttered something about verification and excused himself to call a registrar. Maya leaned back, watching the storm build in her stepmother's eyes. "This was your father's doing," the woman hissed. "He always wanted to punish me." "He wanted to protect what he built," Maya replied. "From greed." The door burst open again, this time with a clerk from the registrar's office holding a certified printout. "All records confirm Miss Maya Thompson as majority shareholder." The lawyer swallowed hard. "Legally speaking, she owns the controlling interest in the Thompson Group." One of the brothers stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. "You can't be serious. She's not even—" Maya looked him straight in the eye. "Not even what?" she asked quietly. The room froze. He faltered, looking at his mother, but she stayed silent, her hand trembling as she pressed it to her forehead. The lead attorney exhaled. "We'll have to honor this. If we don't, the company could face legal liability." Maya gathered her papers calmly, the hum of air conditioning filling the silence. "I'm not here to take your homes," she said, glancing at the brothers. "But this family stops being your mother's puppet today." Her stepmother's face twisted with fury. You'll regret crossing me. I already did, Maya said, standing. Every time I stayed quiet. She turned to leave, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. As she reached the door, the same lawyer who had once read her the will called out, Miss Thompson, your father would be proud. She paused, nodded once, and walked into the sunlight. That evening, news spread quickly. The story hit local papers. Farmer's hidden will reveals secret heir. The stepmother filed for appeal, but the evidence was airtight. One by one, her allies withdrew. Within weeks, the court's decision was final. Maya retained full ownership. The company, the land, and every estate, all under her authority. Standing in her father's barn again, she let the words sink in. Justice didn't roar. It whispered. She ran her fingers over the old beam carved with their initials. The wood was warm now, alive under her touch. Guess you trusted me after all, she whispered. Outside, thunder rolled again, but this time it sounded like applause. Weeks later, spring rain softened the fields around the farmhouse. Grass had started to grow where the ground once cracked, and the barn, her father's last gift, no longer felt like a tomb. Its scent had changed. Less of dust, more of renewal. Maya spent her mornings cleaning the property again, this time with purpose. New paint on the doors, sunlight flooding the loft, birds nesting above the rafters. Each nail she hammered in felt like closing a wound that had been left open too long. One afternoon, a car pulled up. Her stepbrothers stepped out, no suits, no arrogance, just quiet faces. The older one held out a box. Inside was their father's pocket watch, polished, clean. He told Mom he'd lost it, the younger one said softly. Guess he just didn't trust her with it. Maya smiled faintly. He trusted time to show the truth. They stood in silence for a moment, wind brushing through the tall grass. No apologies, no speeches, just understanding. When they drove away, she watched until the car vanished over the hill, the ache in her chest finally easing. That evening, she sat on the barn steps, the same place her father once drank coffee at sunrise. The air smelled of wet soil and hay. She held the watch in her hand, its ticking faint but steady. He didn't leave me a barn, she murmured, watching the horizon burn gold. He left me proof that love outlives greed. Somewhere deep inside, she could almost hear him laugh again, warm, proud, and free. The barn doors creaked gently in the wind, closing on the past and opening to everything ahead. If you believe truth always finds its way to light, no matter how deeply it's buried, share Maya's story, because sometimes what looks like nothing is the inheritance that changes everything.